This channel is sponsored by Cards, a fine store for fine cards that you can use to support me. Just recently, they put up pre-orders for playsets of DZ4 stuff, and also have SR Rarity playsets that you can order now. If you want to help support me and my channel, you can use the link in the description and use code SHARE for 5% off your order. I'm also currently doing a giveaway for some metal cards from MyMetalCards. The deadline is September 30th, and you can use the link in the description to enter it too. Also, all you gotta do is follow me on Twitter and YouTube. Okay, enjoy the video. Sacrifice Class is a deck in DZ Set 3, and it's pretty cool for a couple different reasons. For starters, it's a very accessible Dark States deck. I've actually seen players outright refuse to play Dark States decks because it just feels too complicated with too many moving parts, but this is a good balance. It does the normal Dark States gimmick of stockpiling resources the same way you would with Soul and a bunch of other decks, but this time much more manageable, as you're only stockpiling energy, which also means you don't use the normal staples that other Dark States decks will, making it a great entry point to the nation without feeling too complicated like a bunch of other decks. The second part is that it's a deck that really feels like it matches its aesthetics. Just like in the lore, you're playing as a cultist sacrificing souls to resurrect a great deity. The way you actually do this is best described through Glass's effect. At the start of your main phase, he gives you the effect that whenever your opponent's rearguard or guardian is retired, you get to energy charge 1. And then at the end of the battle you attack the Vanguard, you can energy blast 4 to search your deck or drop zone for a Grand Dogma and ride it as stood. She gets 15k but loses her drive checks, and if you ride, your opponent gets to draw a card. This feeding your opponent's gimmick is another part of the deck. It's kinda just there to throw your opponent a bone because you'll be retiring a ton of their stuff, and in a way, you kinda need them to have more stuff so that you can retire it. Grand Dogma has the effect where at the end of the battle she attacked, you get to retire an opponent's rearguard. And then if your bind zone has 1 or more copies of herself, you retire another, and then if your bind zone has 2 or more copies of her, you get to restand her. The way you bind copies of herself is with her own effect. At the end of your turn, if your bind zone has only 1 or less copies of herself, you rewrite Sacrifice Class in your soul, and then bind her. She also has the effect where if she's bound by any effect other than her own, she's immediately put into drop. Altogether, this means that the first 2 times you use Sacrifice Class to write into Grand Dogma, you'll be forced back into Sacrifice Class. Afterwards, though, you'll be stuck on her, which is okay as that's part of the game plan. At the end of the battle she attacked, you're retiring 2 and restanding her, without losing any drive checks or paying any cost. With this, you should be able to grasp the concept of this deck's game plan. Find ways to retire your opponent's rearguards, and then ride into a great deity to just fucking beat ass. A way you set this up is with Saccharine Bait. It's a normal order that costs 1 counterblast to use and is grade 3. Beyond that, it has effects based on what your Vanguard is. At Sacrifice Class, your opponent gets the effect where all their rearguards and cards in the drop zone lose all their continuous and auto abilities, can't gain them, and can't be moved from rearguard to Guardian Circle. The opponent then chooses 3 units from their drop zone to call to rear, and then you get to draw a card for every 3 of your and your opponent's rearguards in total. This is an amazing way to fill up your opponent's board for sacrifices, and then also fill up your hand. It also has the effect that if you are on Grand Dogma and your Vanguard wasn't placed during the ride phase this turn, activate Persona Ride. You also choose any number of cards from your drop zone other than heals and overtriggers, with different grades, and put them on the bottom of your deck. Which is actually just pretty revolutionary for Dark States. We finally just got a way to not deck out because we're already just going into the late game every game. But anyway, Saccharine Bait is a wonderful card. You can search 1 every game with your grade 2 in the ride deck, as when rode upon you can Soul Blast 1 to search your deck for 1. The grade 1 in your ride deck doesn't necessarily do anything. It can ride to the grade 2 for free, and in fact once you do so, both players draw a card. Onto your other key cards, Musi is a grade 2 rearguard that, while in the front row circle when Sacrifice Class attacks, you can choose an opponent's rearguard and retire. It also has the ability that when your Grand Dogma attacks, he gets 10k. This isn't once per turn since Grand Dogma can attack twice, so this is a 30k body so long as your ritual is set up. Next is Medulla, a grade 1 rearguard that has the act ability to Soul Blast 1 to start a card to be able to play Saccharine Bait from your drop zone, but afterwards it gets sent to the bottom of the deck. He also has the ability where at end of turn you can Energy Blast 5 and draw a card. Pretty good considering anytime your opponent's unit gets retired, you charge 1. Finally is Forkalore, a grade 1 rearguard that, while not necessarily part of the deck, is very useful. When she's placed on rear from hand, you get to charge 1, and then at the end of the battle that she boosted, if you energy blasted 3 or more for an effect this turn, you get to retire her and draw 1. So at this point, I think you can make one of those Divergent Evolution things, but for like Painkiller Angels, cause goddamn there's a lot. Obviously you know my favorite of these though. And that's mostly it for the actual deck. Since DZ3 just came out, Sacrifice Class is still stuck with only 1 wave of support, though it's still pretty good. In fact, unlike other Dark States decks that you'd assume use Soul, this deck doesn't use it at all. So right off the bat, you might want to use Orions, as you're always playing your order, so if you want to search your deck for a little bit and hopefully find more Musis or Medullas, here's your option. So similarly, you can also use Lamina to refund your ride. Immediately after though, this gets pretty hard to write a script for, since common Dark States staples like Spoiler or Clean Sweep Dragon just aren't usable. For one, you never soul charge, so Spoiler is useless, and you don't want to put your opponent's rearguards to soul since you're already retiring them, so Clean Sweep just also doesn't find any use. Discard is still pretty usable though, as you often have plenty of energy to spare. The only time you ever really need it is for 4 to use for Sacrifice Class. So in that case, for some other options that don't necessarily excel your plays, Amethyst is a good defensive option that also countercharges if you really wanted to. And then also considering how long it actually takes to set up your ritual and stay on Grand Dogma, I also like to use Protection Twincast, a grade 2 Regalis piece blitz order that when used for the first time acts as a 10k shield. Afterwards, while in drop, you can remove it from the game to give your attacked unit 5k for each of its grades, making it a pretty valuable choice for your Regalis piece. Though you may also want to consider Angel Ladder since your Muses are extremely valuable. So for a deck, here's what I'm using. I've cannibalized a copy of Sacrifice Glass because Persona Rite isn't as useful, especially once you're stuck on Grand Dogma, in which case you literally just can't use them anymore. And then maxing out on pretty much every other card. The Amethyst and Tizcar are flex spots that you can run one more or one less of either or just because the deck doesn't have too many plays of its own. The ones it does have are really good, but we're kinda just in a tough spot of needing to find something to fill up the space with. Moving on, in general, it's not a bad idea to use energy other than for Sacrifice Glass. You have to make sure that you always have the 4 for his ability, but beyond that, you can get it pretty easily. With the right board, you'll be retiring 4 rear guards every turn, and if your opponents keep guarding from hand, their guardians will get retired and you'll charge more for that too. This is why Medulla is so useful for its draw despite the high cost of Energy Blast 5. And similarly, if you're going second, by turn 3 you'll have 9 energy and you can still blast 7 to draw 1, so long as you have 2 Muses to just charge up to 4. Then for triggers, you definitely want to max out on criticals, and then while you could run draws, I find you draw enough with Saccharine Bait to just survive, so instead I'm going for fronts to make the kill turns that much more potent. It especially helps if you don't actually have Muses to get 20k when your Grand Dogma attacks twice. In the future, I'm not sure what I'd like to see for the deck. Maybe something like a Battledore effect just to force the opponent to retire more and for you to charge more, or hopefully an in-archetype Searcher to replace Orions, as no matter what, Muse is still the best option for any rearguard in the deck. If you've made it to the end, I deeply thank you for watching all the way. If you noticed a slight difference in how I sound, it's because I actually moved into a different room in my house, so we're figuring stuff out still. On top of that, school is starting again soon, so my upload schedule will be affected by that, but if you could still stick around for when I come back, it would mean the world to me. Finally, just a reminder that if you do want to support me, you can use Ronin Cards and code SHARE for 5% off your order to support me, and if you ever want to hear from me, my Twitter is in the description below, where I either talk about random shit or just post my art. But anyways, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.